Today we're going to learn how to use Speedgrade to color correct our footage, and so I've put together a simple sequence of 4 shots that I've cut in halves so that we can see the before and after of our color correction. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to color correct the second half of each shot. To get us into Speedgrade, we will either can just click and select all the images in our sequence or hit Command A to do that, and we'll go to File, Direct Link to Speedgrade. Let's look at the interface. If your scopes don't look like this, I say go ahead and set it in 4-scope mode. If you right click here, this is the color parade. This is the waveform monitor. And you might have, yours might look like it has color on it. And basically I want it to be a Luma waveform monitor. And then these scopes are good if we're dealing with a color chart, but we won't or color bars. We don't necessarily need to mess with them right now, but this is our flesh line here on the vector scope. This is our reference point here for color correction. If we want to do a before and after, we can click here to do that. We can also do before and afters to see the changes in color correction by clicking the eyeballs. And sometimes the computer is slow to render these images, so by clicking the eyeball, it'll jumpstart it. But if we've got a lot of layers going, which we will eventually, this is the quick way to see our changes. We can play the image using the player. We can just scroll through our images. This is the layer area where we will do various color corrections, and we'll do them in multiple steps to make our lives easier. We have a way to, there's some preset looks and styles that we can play with, and we'll goof around with those as well. We just need to be careful. If you double click on one of these, it will erase all the information, all the previous layers here. So you basically want to click and drag it in there. Over here on the right, we'll play with the mask tool, the vignette tool, because that will be really useful to us in terms of creating power windows. So let's look in the color correction interface right here. Basically, we've got the wheels and we've got the sliders, and I like the sliders, so we'll play with those. We can be in a room where we make all the overall corrections, where we just correct for shadows, where we just correct for midtones, where we just correct for highlights. We can affect the saturation going in. Pivot is basically weighting between gamma and gain. Contrast is a quick tool to increase contrast in the image. We've got color temperature, which will take us from orange to blue. We've got our green magenta correction, and we are able to mess with the saturation again at the end. Let's say we're in the overall correction. If I just wanted to affect one of these colors, I would need to unlock it, and then I could play with it. And when you do make a change, then a little box shows up here that if you click on it, it will reset it. You can also click reset here at your layer level. There's basically 2 types of layers we're going to be playing with. We've got primary, the primary layer, and the secondary layer, and I'll get into that as well. So let's go ahead and begin our first color correction. So we're in our primary layer, and I just kind of want to boost the contrast. And basically what we want to do, this is a flat file, and so basically all the digital information has been, the Luma has been stored into the middle, so there's no extreme blacks or extreme whites, and that allows us to capture more color information on the image. And now it's our job to bring the contrast back. And so basically in this color parade, what we want to do to get our pure blacks, we want to get this touching down to 0, and to get pure whites, we want to get these lines touching up to 100. So let's do a quick correction by just grabbing the contrast and pulling it right a little bit and see what we get for a result. And we're getting much closer to getting our black levels right. So I'm going to keep pulling on the contrast. Let's try something right there. All right, and that's pretty good. Now we need to increase our whites. So let's get over here and we will grab the gain bar and we'll drag our highlights to the right. Click in and click out so it thinks. And it's getting a little better. We can do some more. And let's take a look at before and after. Let's go back to overall. I'd like to boost the saturation a little bit. And in our midtones, I would like to brighten them up a little bit as well. So let's bring up our mids to make our image brighter. Okay. Okay. So that overall looks pretty good. If we take a look at our waveform monitor, we see that our red is a bit different from our green and our blue. So let's play with the gamma on our red. Make sure this is unlocked. And let's slide the gamma right to raise it up. Let's see. And so it looks a little bit better. It looks like we need a little more blue in our midtone gamma. Let's see if that changes it much. All right. And that looks pretty good. We've got kind of like a nice white level. You know, we've got pure whites. Our color correction looks good. I would like to have some more saturation in my image. So let's just go back to overall. Crank up the saturation a little bit more. Okay. So that's a good basic color correction setting. That's our before, that's our after. Now let's play a little more. Let's go to the, let me find sepia. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag it up to the top layer here. And we see that we've got this extreme look. We do have the ability to adjust each of these parameters individually. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to take the opacity slider and I'm going to just bring down this look to make it seem more subtle. So we'll go to 50%, see what that looks like. There's normal. That's with the 50%. Let's keep going a little bit more. And I kind of like that slightly warmer look that we get by setting that slider at about 25%. Let's hit the plus P to create another primary layer. And now we're going to add a mask to this, and we'll click on this vignette. And what this does is that it allows us, this gap here allows us to feather the correction to make it seem more subtle. And so basically I want our center correction around our subjects. And then we'll create a nice big feather from that correction. And kind of a more organic shape also makes it seem a little more natural. Okay. And so what we will do now is, so we've created this mask, and what I'm going to tell it to do is to apply the correction to the outside of that mask. And so I'm in the overall mode, I'm in the gamma, all three are locked, and I'm just going to pull down the gamma and darken the outside edges of this vignette. And the whole idea is to do this so that we don't even notice that the vignette is there. And if we want to continue to edit the shape, we'll click the widget here. And if we can play with the opacity, if we want to make that a little more subtle, I'm going to just bring up the gamma just a little bit. And so this kind of now gives us a late summer, early autumn feel that we didn't have previously. Let's move on to the next color correction. Here we have this singer, and if we look at the color parade, we see that we need to have our black level lowered, and our white level is pretty much there. We also have too much red. These two guys, their shapes look pretty good, but we have a little too much red. So let's begin by, in our overall room, and we'll just play with the contrast, and we'll bring down that black level. Okay, that's a little too much. That's better. I'm going to pull it back just a hair more. Alright, so we've set a good black level here. Let's go ahead and I want to adjust. Let's go ahead and make an overall adjustment to that red. So we're just going to grab the gamma and we'll pull that down and see what. Okay, we'll reset the gamma. Let's do that now to the reset. Let's unlock the gain, and we'll just pull down the red channel gain. That looks a little better. I'm going to add a little gain in the blue channel because it's just a little bit lower now. Alright, so this is our before, there's our after. So we've got kind of like a nice basic correction going on. Maybe she's a little too warm, so we can change our color temperature a little bit. I'm going to pull it back. Alright. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and create another primary mask, and we'll create another vignette. focus this vignette on her. And we will, in the overall world, we'll click all of our gamma, and we'll pull down our gamma. Oh, and we will set it to be outside the mask. So that's too heavy. Let's pull it back some. Let's play with our mask some more so that our focus is completely on her and her band is there just to make noise. Just like to increase the feather a little bit more. There's our first correction. There's no correction. There's our first correction. There's our second correction. Alright, so we've got our before and after. That looks pretty good. Let's move on to this space. Oh, actually, let's come back to here. There's one thing I wanted to play with. Let's see all this red here. Let's see if we can pull that down a little bit. So I'm going to hit the secondary tool, and what that does is that opens up a new tool that allows us to focus on a certain color. So I'm going to hit this plus, and then I'm going to hold the mouse down and I'm going to kind of drag within this red to kind of capture the grayscale values of this red, and then they will show up here. And if we go to gray out and we'll go to white and black, we will see how well we did with creating this mask. And basically what we want to do is everything that's red, we want to appear white in this, and so then that's the only color we'll be affecting with our color correction. And so making everything else black is our desire, so that doesn't change. And so what we can do is just tweak our color, tweak our sliders here until our black is pretty good. Let me see what this, I want to see what this little bit of redness is. Okay, that's her ear. Okay, that's cool. We can keep that. Alright, and so now we will go back to normal view. And in our secondary correction, we will just pull down the saturation of our red. Oh, let's reset that. Let's do it in our final saturation. There's our before, there's our after. I'm going to come back just a little bit on the saturation. Alright, that's cool. So now let's move into our new guy right here. Taking a look at our color parade. We need to lower our pedestal a little bit, and there's not a lot of room for highlights in here because it's supposed to be like a dingy space, but we can raise that up a little bit so at least some of his shirt pops out a little more and creates a little more contrast. So let's start by playing with our contrast. We won't need to do it much. Okay. I'm gonna pull that black back just a little more. All right, so we got our pedestal set here, and now let's jack up the gain in our whites. These should be all selected. We'll raise up our whites a lot. Okay. And so his shirt is popping out a little more, and that's pretty cool. Now let's play with the overall color temperature. And in fact, what I want to do is I'll create a new primary layer. And let's just blue this up a little bit. Make it seem a little more unfriendly. There we go. There's our blue. And then we'll just kind of play with the opacity. So this is just our previous color correction. This is making it look a little bluer, which actually is making our whites look a little whiter. And I think this is a pretty interesting look. Next thing I want to do is, just so that we can play with the secondary color correction tool, we'll create that layer, we'll hit the plus, and then we're just going to increase the saturation on his tie a little bit. And we'll take a look at the white black, and we need to eliminate the flesh tone, which is fairly close to that. Tie. Okay, sliding this down is getting some more of that flesh tone out of there. Alright, we'll call that pretty good. And now we will go back to our normal view. And we will increase the saturation of our tie. And then lastly, we'll put another vignette on our character. I do vignettes on almost every shot because it really helps us focus our attention on where we want the audience to be. And it'll kind of feel a lot more like there's a spotlight on him. And we're in overall, and we'll just pull down the gamma some and see what that looks like. Okay, and now I need to have it set so that it's happening outside the mask. Click on the widget tool. Make it a little bigger. Our feather. Alright, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go to our last correction. So we've got another exterior by the lake, and this time we are going to make it look like it is day for night. But the first thing we need to do is get our color balance proper. So let's go back to our contrast. And I'm going to keep the black level a little stronger this time in order to help our day for night look. we want to jack up our whites a little bit more. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, that looks pretty good, and I'm going to pull down our overall saturation some. Because in a day for night environment, our perception of color is less. Okay, we'll call that a good starter. Here in our looks, there's a day for night plugin preset. I'm just going to grab that and drag that right on top. And I'm going to reduce that amount of our day for night preset. Now we're going to add a mask, and what we want to do is we want this mask to kind of follow our tree line, and we want to be in as tight as possible on our subjects. We're going to follow the tree line here. And we are going to lower our gamma in a very heavy-handed sort of way. And we're going to set it outside the mask. Let's go back to our mask, and we're going to make it even smaller around our people. Let's go ahead and make another primary mask, and we are going to create another vignette, and we are going to put it up here so that it's pretty much just in the sky. And we're going to keep this one inside the mask when we pull down our gamma to darken our sky. Let's see what that looks like. Oops, undo. I want to grab this one. Fill that out. Let's increase the contrast of it. actually, let's go ahead and reset the gamma, and we'll just mess with the contrast up there. Bring our feather down into this world a little better. Here's our other vignette. I think we can make this a little darker. Alright, now we'll go back to our day for night, and we'll boost the blue up a little bit more now that we're darker. And let's pull the gain back a little bit in our highlights. Make it bluer. So here in our sky, I'd like to build in a little more contrast. Let's see what that does. That's too much. We'll reset that. Reset those colors, and we'll play with contrast, see if we can pick up our highlights in the sky around those clouds a little better. I'm going to reset this whole thing. Just play with contrast. Okay, nope. Make sure the eyeball's on. We'll reset the contrast. Pull down the gamma. Push up the overall gain. And then one thing we'll do that will help us is that we'll unlock, instead of adding blue, I like to take away red and green. And we'll do the same thing here. On our primary layer. Now we've created a bluer feel. Okay, so we'll call that good enough. So when we're done, we will hit the render tool. We will tell it yes. It will send it back to Premiere. And we've got our before and our after changes. And we will go to Sequence, Render Effects In to Out, render this file with your name on it, and post it on D2L.